So you may be a beginner in the gym yourself or know somebody who's a beginner in the gym, and you or they may be wondering when and how are you supposed to increase your weights in the gym? Because after all, that is the purpose of resistance training, is to get stronger and perform better. Well, actually the answer to this and the concept is very simple and straightforward. And once you understand it, it's going to work wonders for ultimately your muscle gain, your strength gain, and your confidence in the gym. So let's get to it. What's good, YouTube? Coach John back again with the plant, alive and well because I have been watering it. Turns out that if it's in front of my face, I won't forget. Anyways, guys, if you want to get to your fitness goals faster and more enjoyably, make sure you hit the subscribe button and hit the like button right now so we can boost this channel up to help more people around the world. By the way, if you're wondering why I'm wearing a sweater, it's because I'm in Canada, and take a look at what it's looking like out there right now. Yep, that is, my friends, the beginning of a blizzard. All right, so happy to not be out there, but it is still somewhat cold. So with that said, it's time to get into the content. Now, before we do, make sure you check out my other content on the channel if you haven't yet, and follow me on my Instagram right here. You can send me messages if you want about some concerns or questions you have, and I will answer them for you. You can also check out some of the workout programs I've put together myself that has helped a lot of people out there build muscle and strength with built-in progressions for you already. Those are in the description down below. All right, before we decide whether or not it's time for you to increase weight, how or when, we have to go over just a few fundamental things to keep in mind before asking yourself that question. The first one is proper form. Now, this might seem like an obvious one. However, something that you got to understand is it is extremely likely, if you have not been performing an exercise enough to have that proper form down, nice and controlled on the way up and down. What happens is if you start to progress too fast, the form actually starts to break down, and what may seem like getting stronger in, let's say, a bench press or a squat is actually really just degradation of your form over time. So what I mean by this is you have somebody who's bench pressing with perfect form, nice tempo, and then they increase the weight, and then they increase again, and they increase again. And the reality is the only reason they're able to increase is because they've started to shortchange their form, which allows them to lift more weight by default. So this is not to be confused with actually getting stronger. That is just your form taking a hit as a result of you trying to lift too fast. So you want to make sure that your form is perfect, as close to perfect as you can have it, and that way when you progress, you keep that form at the same standard. A few other things you want to ensure is that your warm up, your cool down, and your recovery as a whole is on point as well. Again, a common mistake. What happens is when you're increasing weight and getting stronger in the gym, it does open up risk for injury if you're not being considerate of the other factors like stretching enough, warming up properly, and cooling down properly. Another important thing is I get a lot of people that tell me that they are afraid to increase weight in the gym because they don't have somebody spotting them. And the truth of the matter is you should not need a spotter at any point in the gym unless you're, of course, competing or going to be a power lifter and lifting extremely heavy lifts. So for the average gym go out there, for somebody who just wants to look to get stronger, again, this is probably tailored more towards beginners in this case, you do not need a spotter, as you should be able to handle these weights completely on your own. If you do need a spotter for, let's say, a lift off here, you know, a dumbbell shoulder press lift off, any of these types of things, then it's probably too heavy. And lastly, you're going to need to track your workouts. Okay, now you can get away at first as a beginner by kind of guessing your way through it and just kind of arbitrarily increasing weights over time, but again, you're going to start sacrificing form, you're going to be increasing too fast, and the only way to avoid yourself from hitting that short ceiling that you have from not tracking is by tracking. That way you know exactly how many reps to beat next time, exactly how much weight you did last time, and so on. Tracking your workouts is essential to making progress in the long term. Though it may seem like it's going to cause slower progress at first, think about it like taking one step back to take 10 steps forward in the future. The last thing you want to do is be like me when back in the day I never tracked, and so I arbitrarily increased my weights and went off how I felt that day, which eventually led to a lot of setbacks that forced me to take so many steps back in the future. So if you want to avoid that, tracking your workouts is key. key. All right, let's talk about the progression. When and how to increase weights in a gym. I'm gonna lay it out like this with a very basic, straightforward sort of structure. So imagine you have an exercise and we're gonna take the squat, and your goal here is you always have an upper range of reps that you should be hitting. So an example is if you're trying to do 3 sets of 8 to 10 reps or 3 sets of 10 reps, once you're able to comfortably hit 3 sets of 10 reps with X amount of weight, let's use the example of 200 pounds, then and only then, making sure that form and all the things we talked about prior are in place, is it okay to increase that weight. Now, when increasing the weight, it's always best to go for a more conservative approach. Instead of trying to add a 25-pound weight on each side at a time like some men like to do, it's always best to increase slowly. Again, keep in mind the 1 step back, 10 steps forward thing comes to mind. Increasing by 2.5 to 5 pounds relative to the lift is probably your best bet. So back to the example, if you've been squatting 200 pounds, your goal was 3 sets of 10. Maybe the first time or the last time you did 3 sets of 9, this time you hit 3 sets of 10, but you weren't too comfortable, so you do it again for 3 sets of 10. If you're able to do it 2 weeks straight for that upper range of the reps, in this case 10, then it's definitely a good indication that you should try upping the weight. Let's say you add 5 pounds, which again is a reasonable thing to do. In the next workout, your goal is now 205 pounds, and you're also aiming for 3 sets of 10. However, since you've now increased the weight, there's potential that you won't hit those reps and you might hit a little bit lower. So you hit 3 sets of 10 with 200, now you've upped it to 205. In this next workout, when you hit 205, you might only get 3 sets of 8. Well, the goal is still 3 sets of 10 before you increase again. So you're going to keep hitting that weight until you can get 3 sets of 10 reps clean, and then it's time to increase again. Now, something to keep in mind is, as a beginner, if you are one, you can actually probably get away with increasing 5 pounds week to week or every other week for quite some time. This is what we call noob gains, and I'm jealous of you if you still got them, because that is a great time where you can really make amazing strength and muscle gains as a result. So keep that in mind. You may progress very quickly, but again, unless you're tracking and very much aware of these numbers and what you've been hitting in the past, you may not progress as fast as you could. So you have to understand that what I just laid out there with the 3 sets of 10 example, and by the way, the same goes for a 2 sets of 8 or 4 sets of 12 or whatever the case is, whatever rep range you choose. However, if you want muscle gain and strength, it's typically going to be between the 6 to 12 rep range. It's going to apply across the board, but the progression I just laid out, where you're just trying to hit a certain rep range, increase, hit the rep range, increase, hit the rep range, is more so of a linear progression and is best suited towards beginners and some intermediate. If you are leaning towards or are an advanced lifter, then things get a lot more complicated, where you actually have to manipulate volume, frequency, intensity, undulate your reps and sets and so on, which is some technical stuff that, if again you're a beginner, you don't need to know for now. And I have other content on the channel specific to that. So keep in mind that these linear progressions won't happen forever, but they will get you to a point where you see massive progress, even upwards of maybe 80% of your maximum muscular gain potential. And then from there, once you hit this part where you've become an intermediate or really advanced lifter, you have to start looking into, and again, watching some of the content on my channel, as to how to manipulate and progress from there. One more thing I want to mention that's very important. Based off my example, I used the squat, and let's say, like I said, you increase by increments of 5 pounds, even perhaps 10 pounds, which could be possible in some cases. You have to understand that this does not transfer across all exercises to that degree. What do I mean by this? Well, an example would be an isolation exercise, right? When you compare isolation versus compound exercises, the potential, the wiggle room there is much lower. Again, it might sound confusing. Let me break it down for you. If you have a bicep curl, for example, and that bicep curl, your max potential weight that you will probably lift in your lifetime would be maybe between 40 to 60 pounds if you're a male, for let's say 6 to 10 reps, right? Well, if you look at a squat, your max potential there could be anywhere from 315 to 500 pounds for the same rep range, depending on strength potential level, etc. And so a 5 pound increase on the squat squat, a massive compound exercise, is much smaller relative to the bicep curl trying to increase 5 pounds. So something you have to understand is that this perfectly linear progression does not apply that straightforwardly to an isolation exercise like a bicep curl. So what you would do there is the same concept, but instead you need to get those reps up a lot higher. So the upper range should be probably closer to 12, even 15 reps. Once you hit 12 or 15, your goal is likely to increase by only 2.5 pounds at a time, where you'll probably reset all the way back down to around 8 reps, let's say, just for the sake of example. You want to build all the way back up that rep range, okay? Because again, the incremental changes that you make on a dumbbell for an isolation exercise can be a lot bigger in comparison to that exercise's strength potential, as opposed to your squat, where if you go from 200 to 205 is not that big of a jump in the grand scheme of things. So that's something to keep in mind that people often overlook. However, I don't want to confuse you or make things too complicated. That's all you need to know. That is how and when you increase the weights as a beginner, or in a lot of cases intermediates. That's all you need to know. Now, if you're not tracking your weights with your phone, and by the way, to track them, I do, if you have an iPhone, recommend Gravitas. Okay, I'll post a little picture of what it looks like here. A very amazing tool that I just found out about for tracking your workouts, which is awesome. Or you could just use Evernote or the Notes app like I've been using for a long time. But if you're not tracking your workouts, then yes, it's going to come a time where you hit plateaus and you get stuck earlier than you could. So for all you out there that aren't tracking, start tracking. Make sure the form, like I mentioned, and all those things, the warm, the cool down, the stretch, the rest, the sleep, nutrition is all on point. And all you need to do to make at least 80% of your maximum muscle and strength gains in your lifetime is to simply increase linearly over time. In fact, though I am probably considered more so of an advanced lifter, I still can get away with progression in a linear fashion in some cases. So that's all you need to know. How to increase weights and when to increase them in the gym if you're a beginner to intermediate. I hope that you found this one helpful. If so, hit that like button like I mentioned earlier, and comment below anything else you'd like to see. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you as always. Love y'all. I hope you're having an awesome day, and don't forget to subscribe because I'm catching you in the next video. If you do, I don't want you to miss it, and I'm out.